Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Charlie Nicklin. I'm the Chief Executive of IAgrE, and I'd like to thank you all for joining our November presentation today. I'd like to welcome Dr. Mark McBride for our presentation today. Mark is the founder and CEO of EqualEngineers, a company who offer an array of diversity and inclusion consultancy and training services, as well as creative events. Mark's presentation today will explore the role of ED&I in addressing skills gaps. He'll share some case studies plus a demonstration on practical strategies to enhance productivity and safety within teams. As usual with our lectures, everyone will be muted. And if you'd like to ask a question, then please pop it in the chat at the bottom of the screen. And then at the end of the presentation, we can unmute you so you can ask in person. Okay, I'll now hand over to Mark.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Mark. I run a company called EqualEngineers. And if I had to give you a about 10-second elevator pitch about what I'm all about, what the stuff is all about, is I use the familiarity that engineers have with safety in creating physically safe working environments, and how can we use that construct to extend that to psychological safety. Basically, I believe that diversity, equity, and inclusion needs to sit or intersect more than it does with safety when it comes to our high hazard industries. And I'm going to talk you through now how I have arrived at that conclusion and how I am building out my business around that. So I'm a chartered chemical engineer by background. I specialized in technical safety engineering, and I did a PhD at Imperial College London. My PhD was in carbon capture and storage. I then went into industry and specialized in concept design. So working in oil and gas, helping operators get licenses to operate, doing workshops with clients, with engineers on inherent safety, doing hazard identification studies, doing hazard and operability studies. So doing a lot of stuff related to technical safety. And then I moved, I discovered my love of EDI. I interchanged the letters, so DEI. My Scottish accent, D's, E's, and B's always sound the same. So let me just call it EDI for simplicity. I discovered that when I started working in industry. So I had extra time. So so see the chat there. So I'm going to focus on delivering and I can take questions at the end. I helped set up what was the initial diversity and inclusion working group of the Institution of Chemical Engineers. This was over 10 years ago, and it was very, very important, but I didn't see anything that represented who I am as a gay man. So essentially, I set up an LGBTQ plus organization called InterEngineering to connect, inform, and empower LGBTQ engineers and supporters. And that grew. We had over 1,500 engineers join it over the subsequent years. We had regional groups around the United Kingdom. We supported engineers internationally with inquiries about how to support them in places where wasn't that safe to be out. And yeah, it really was a really great social enterprise. I realized more needed to be done for EDI, so I set up a business called EqualEngineers, and that's what I now run. And the plan for that was to broaden out and create an entity that would apply equal focus to each strand of EDI, of diversity. And that's how we grew the business to do training, events, recruitment, and some consultancy work for organizations. I now run the business from afar, and I recently, about 3 months ago, relocated to New York, and I'm now exploring what the opportunities are here in the US. It's a very interesting time to be here right now, given the work that we do. In terms of like how I've earned my reputation, I received an MBE for the role I've played in I earned it for services to diversity inclusion in engineering. So I got it in King Charles's 2023 birthday honours. So about a year and a half ago. And prior to that, I was awarded the Rooke Award from the Royal Academy of Engineering in 2022 for my work in promoting engineering to the public. So I know my stuff in this space. I've helped organizations, institutions, industry players, and also universities when it comes to what should we do on EDI, how do we create inclusive cultures. I share this with you, this slide, because it was a very personal day for me. Obviously, it was a brilliant celebration. But this was the first ceremony where Windsor was allowing you to bring more than one person. So it was back to business as usual as it had been pre-pandemic, pre-COVID. So I was able to bring 3 people, and the youngest you could bring was age 5 and above. And my son turned 5 last year. He's now 6. So my daughter was a little bit unhappy, but Hunter got to come to Windsor Castle with us. And my mum came down from Scotland, and she's not had very good health over the last few years. And she now has to use a wheelchair. She's now a wheelchair user due to her, and she's on dialysis and everything. So my lived experience, I often talk about lived experience, and that's what you have based on who you are and what your familial situation is and what your friends have. And then there's learned experience. There's learning about how others experience the world through building a relationship grounded in empathy and curiosity, where you don't feel threatened by what they've got to share with you, where you engage with them, listen, and fully absorb, because you will never be that person. So learning from listening and storytelling is a way in which we can expand our knowledge on the world and become better people. So I was acquiring learned experience through building out EqualEngineers and doing events focused on disability, so on and so forth. But I really felt it hit home when my mum started getting into this way of living and with her health deteriorating. So it has become more lived experience as well as learned experience. It's not happening to me directly as me, but it's happening indirectly within my sphere of the world, personal life. So it's important to tune into that when you're figuring out what all this stuff is about. The reason I feel like for engineering, we need to go back to safety being what grounds us in inclusive cultures, is that's what creating safe working environments is fundamentally all about. And ironically, some people are feeling alienated within engineering in the push for greater diversity. And it's only but exacerbated culturally within where the way the world is at the moment. So as I mentioned, I have all the layers of privilege going around me, apart from the fact that I am gay. So in terms of like minoritized status, you know, being a gay man, I've grown up with moments of exclusion, moments of having to cover, to hide, to question my safety, make decisions based on who I am, first and foremost, not what I can do and how good am I at this piece. And a classic example of that was my PhD offer. My PhD was sponsored by Qatar Petroleum. This was, you know, before I discovered anything about diversity and inclusion. I was an undergrad who just got engaged to my boyfriend and now was pursuing PhD applications. And I was really, really nervous about having to go and work in the Middle East. I'm quite an open book. I'm quite out, and I feared, I guess, for my safety. I didn't want to be working in an environment where that I'd be second guessing myself, questioning, would I have to cover, hide, mask? And this is a concept. I use that as my experience to just share with you that it's something that we all do at some point in our lives. So the idea of masking, covering, hiding, it's a term for being where you're not being open about who you are in a particular moment in time. And then the energy delta between having to show up as someone who you're not and be creating a boundary layer around you to conceal and hide the truth, that energy delta is exhausting. It takes a toll on people's mental health, and gradually it can ground you down. And the trouble is, when we talk about creating safe cultures, it's not just creating physically safe environments where people can operate a tractor without fear of, being run over or having an incident. It's also about being able to open up and say, do you know what? I'm not having a good day right now. I've got this going on in my life, etc., etc. And that's really the place within which I work with teams. It's trying to see the familiarity between physical safety and creating psychologically safe working environments for anyone, and I mean anyone, even if you're a white, straight, heterosexual, able-bodied, neurotypical male that makes up 86% of the engineering workforce in the UK, where anyone can be open about anything that may be going on in their life. And I'll show you some statistics in a moment that kind of exemplify the fact that we do not have a culture where that is the case right now. Because if we did, some of the things I'm about to show you, in my view, wouldn't be happening. So let's explore that and unpack that a bit further. These are just some other snapshots of when we were at Inter-Engineering and growing the organization. EqualEngineers is the business through which I'm now channeling my entrepreneurship and trying to really create a better place for the engineering workforce. And, we've broadened our focus to include other strands of diversity. So this is an example project of where we did a project for neurodivergent and disabled engineering students where we came in and worked with the University of Plymouth to do some focus groups with their students, with their staff, with their technical staff, and then feed that back to the faculty. The students from Plymouth also take part in our mentoring program, our EqualEngineers Pathways program, where we pair them up with engineers in industry. I guess the point that's relevant for yourselves, given that I'm talking to you as a professional engineering institution, one of the 42 that exist in the UK, we've done some work with PEIs in the past. So I wrote the IMIChE, the Institute of Mechanical Engineers' diversity strategy for 2020 to 2025. We're currently working on a project for the Institution of Fire Engineers, where we're looking at what the institution is doing around EDI. And tomorrow, actually, I'm hosting a workshop for the Engineering Council, convening together most representatives from most of the PEIs within the UK to figure out what is it that engineering institutions can do to really create an inclusive profession that helps attract, develop, and retain talent from all backgrounds. So really keen to hear your thoughts on that, actually. I wanted to mention the masculinity in engineering work. So if I wind back to 2017, I set EqualEngineers up, starting to grow a business where the intention is to have a focus on disability and a focus on neurodiversity and a focus on ethnicity, focus on LGBT and women in engineering, etc., etc. But actually, I very quickly learned that centering the conversation on the experiences of each minoritized group doesn't really lead to systemic impact and fundamental cultural change. Because the energy around the conversation, and some of you on this call may resonate with you, is very them and us. It's very polarizing. It's very binary. It's very, and you hear this play out in the elections that we've had, both in the UK and also within the US, woke culture and cancel culture, etc. And, the male majority feel alienated and left out, quite frankly, in the push for EDI. And so we need to have the conversation in a way that makes everyone feel included and actually that they are part of the solution. So It was 2018, and I discovered this was my light bulb aha moment. We need a way forward here. It was 2018. I discovered the suicide rates broken down by occupation from the Office of National Statistics. And in those rates, construction, manufacturing, and the process industries, the industries within which I had been employed as a safety engineer, had the highest rate of loss of life due to suicide. And I'm sure I haven't gone and checked the data, but I'm sure farming was up there and agriculture was up there as well. And this just made me gasp. I was like, how can this be? We would never tolerate such a high rate of loss of life due to any physical incidents in safety engineering. So why are we allowing that with where people's psychological safety isn't, being looked after? Because the whole point of DEI, EDI programs is to create a place where you can be your whole self, bring your whole self to work, minimize that energy delta between masking, covering, and hiding. Well, obviously it's not working for everyone. Otherwise, I believe we wouldn't have such a high incident rate of suicidal ideation and self-harm and suicide. So I didn't believe the data, to be honest. I wanted to get some of our own data. So in 2018, we launched this piece of research called Masculinity in Engineering. And then we reran it again in 2021, 3 years later. And in these data sets, we discovered that 1 in 5, so we had over 800 respondents. 1 in 5 engineers said they'd lost a work colleague to suicide. That was the same in 2018 and 2021. And then when it became personal, 1 in 5 reported suicidal ideation self-harm in 2018. And in 2021, 1 in 4, so that number went up, reported self-harm, suicidal ideation. So this, to me, showcased the fact that we have a problem. And the way we need to go about this needs to change fundamentally. So I've spent a lot of time sort of ideating on this, on how do we do this? How do we solve this? So after that first survey, we pivoted and we redesigned our engagement programs, where we still have our things that we do for minoritized groups to act as a source of equity, to level the playing field. But we need to change the system of our current culture and work with the system that we have now, the engineers, the people in the sector that are there now. And that involves recognizing that this is the sentiment and this is the state of affairs. So how do we communicate the fact that inclusion, diversity, and belonging is for everyone, And I feel we need to, this provides a solution. We need to be able to communicate to every engineer that ED&I is about you as well. And I cannot tell you now the reframing of it in this way, how impactful it is for the everyday engineer who's worked in the sector for decades, where they felt this movement that they classify as being for millennials and Gen Z and what have you, where they felt excluded in this new wave that we see business leadership moving in, like they've not felt part of it. When actually, if we were being good at achieving our inclusive cultures, people would be open about whatever it is that's going on in their lives. So I found when we expand the definition of diversity to really focus in on diversity of life experience, and things that are often taboo to be spoken about, the fact that you can then speak about it really helps lighten the load. And I believe if we communicate psychological safety through that lens, where we champion engineers to be open about whatever it is that might be driving these incident rates, this mindset, I think we could help bring these numbers down, but also help grease the wheels, I guess, and make it easier to create inclusive cultures. I feel like we're still too lost in this forest of who's it for, who's it not for, and we're missing the trick because we need engineers, we need people, we need to keep engineers. and we really need to be focusing on the engineering and doing the engineering. We cannot let a lack of diversity and non-inclusive cultures be a reason for us not meeting net zero targets, figuring out how to grow, crops to help feed the population, and so on and so forth. So I spend a lot of my time thinking about this. How do we help organizations, help universities, help institutions, help industry partners, help trade associations communicate ED&I through this lens? Because I think the alignment between safety and ED&I is how it is going to work for engineering. Different business, different ways for ED&I work differently in different sectors. In the finance sector, the business case for ED&I, the return on investment decisions really drives action. In the legal sector, compliance really drives decision. In engineering, not so much. It looks good on the surface, but it doesn't really shift the attitude and shift the needle. But the alignment with safety is something that engineers have. And if you communicate it through the lens of, think of that crane operator who's there, they're doing, I mean, I'm in a 19th floor story building right now, they're doing a crane operation, doing high hazard operations. You want them to be not just physically present and mentally absent, you want them to be physically present and mentally present as well. And that energy delta between masking and hiding and covering and showing up at work, and a culture where we're not being open about what's going on in our minds, is something that I feel is the real experience right now, and we need to crack it. I should caveat that it isn't about being open about everything now, and we now have to have no private life. But it's very different working in a culture which is, look, we're here, we're ready for you if you need us, come talk to us, than one which is, don't ask, don't tell, we don't want to know, just come do your job and get on. And I can tell you some of the biggest things that affect male engineers when we present our iceberg. We've got this nice model where we have an iceberg and we've got a water line, and there's stuff beneath the iceberg that stuff that you cannot see from looking at someone, and the diversity beneath the waterline is so much richer and greater than just what you can see from top. When you focus in on whether it's being able to be open about financial planning, gambling, addiction issues, whether you're struggling to conceive, fertility issues, things that affect relationships, that's the sort of stuff that is affecting people right now. And likewise for minority groups, it might be you're struggling with postnatal depression, or you're in the closet at work, or you don't identify with the gender that you're assigned at birth, etc., etc. I feel there is a space for more of us to be open about our diversity stories, so that we can be that metaphorical lighthouse that guides people to us. I worked with an executive team once, 10 people, and it transpired in the flow of delivery with our facilitation that 3 of them had been going through IVF, or struggling to conceive that within the last 3 years, and none of them knew about it with one another. They hadn't been open about it with each other. And it was in that session that it kind of came to life, it became apparent. And they thought, my goodness, that's 30% of people in this room. They were about 2,500 people. If we scale this up, what's this affecting proportionately across our workforce? So guess what they did? They convened a campaign. They set up a parent and carers network. Some of the leadership team started being open about their experiences, and it brokered a conversation for the wider workforce. And they linked it back, to their EDI stuff. So I think there's a lot we can learn from safety engineering. We've got the theory that's there. The Bradley curve is something that's developed by DuPont. We have injury rate as a function of culture. In the past, we do things to keep ourselves safe reactively. It's based on our natural instincts. Used to be acceptable in the past for young children to be at work. We figured that's not very good. Things became safer, legislation came in. So it was a compliance-driven approach to safety. So we had dependent cultures. We kept ourselves safe because our supervisor said so. We figured it's quite good not dying at work or getting injured at work. So we did it for our own self-preservation, independent culture. And then now we have an interdependent culture where we look out for one another to create safe teams. I'm proposing a kind of extrapolation to that, where we look at building safe teams, where we look out for one another, and we're driven by the fact that if I look out for you, you will also look out for me, and that makes me feel safer. And that also means not just calling out unsafe acts without fear of retribution, but also calling out non-inclusive behaviors. What we've had in engineering over time is a gradual normalization of non-inclusive behaviors that have gone unchallenged due to a lack of diversity in the workforce. And so what we find is we have a culture, a system where people come in, they don't have the privilege of having strength in numbers because they're not represented proportionately to composition of the broader UK society. And so they end up feeling a little bit excluded, ground down, and then they leave. So the number of women leaving engineering in the age 35 to 54, I think, age bracket is the highest that it has ever been. So again, if we take a systems engineering approach to this and we want to think of all the hard work that we've done over the last 100 years since the Women's Engineering Society was founded to get more gender diversity, more females into engineering, we're losing people at the highest rate than we ever have. So the chemical engineer in me that does a mass balance means what you've got in, if what you've got coming in is less than what you've got coming out, then you're not in a state of accumulation, which is where you want to be. You're not even at steady state. You're losing talent. So we need to take a systemic look at skills, attraction, how we're doing our attraction campaigns to bring people in, but also what we're doing on a rolling basis to really build these true inclusive cultures. So the bit in which we are contributing to that through EqualEngineers is running our Student Pathways program. We try and practice what we preach with diversity collection. These are the statistics of the 800 or so students that I believe have applied over the last 5 cohorts that we've ran to do the program. We also run a set of awards called the Engineering Talent Awards, where we create a platform through our media partnership with the Metro and the Royal Academy of Engineering to showcase good practice. So there are individual entries and organizational entries there as well. And the thing that I had to get out my system to really distill all my thoughts was I've written a book. So it's called The Safe Leader. I feel like I've taken a chip out of my brain and put it in here to have it's a guide essentially for how we can really enact some of this stuff. Dame Judith Hackett, who's the former chair of the HSE, is a big fan of the work that I've done. She really likes how we align with engaging everyone. And yeah, I mean, if you think about she oversaw the Hackett review into the building safety regulations review post Grenfell. So there are elements there when you think about inclusion and diversity. Do you have a diverse team? Are you thinking about all stakeholders when you're designing your engineering systems? And so it highlights the importance of diversity in the composition of our teams as we do our engineering, but also the end communities that we are designing systems for doing engineering with. How is what we're designing or what we're creating or the service product, how is it impacting them? So I built this model. It's really a work in progress, to be honest. I started off with it being linear, but then people started asking questions being like, oh, can you join at any point? Can you enter this cycle at any point? And I mapped it out on a whiteboard and I thought, absolutely, share, act, feel, empower. The idea is that we create space where people get to understand their own diversity story first and foremost, their own difference. What have they got to share with the world? Bring that to the surface, get comfortable in sharing that with the world, and then take it through to action, creating that sense of feeling. How can you empathize with others? And then that source of, can you be a source of empowerment for others to diversify their frame of reference on the world? We've built this is just a sort of template training program for a client that we're doing this with in Bristol. We're launching it in January. This particular program, it's called the Safe Leader Training Program. We've evolved it into 4 modules, 1 per letter: share, act, feel, empower. And then there is, I'm a big believer that if we're helping people figure out what their diversity story is, some of us just have to dig a bit deeper to figure that out, because we've got layers of privilege that we need to get through. Can we create better storytellers as well? So I'm bringing in some experts in storytelling, presentation, how to tell good stories and how to map a story. And so it's my hope that through rolling out this training program and scaling it in the sort of 5 to 10 years to come, we'll really start to have an impact on this as a concept within the sector. So yeah, that's where we're at right now. EqualEngineers is so busy right now with all our stuff that the Safe Leader, I feel, needs its own space. So I have actually now set up a McBrideWright.com website. I'm starting a podcast called the Safe Leader Podcast. I've recorded about 6 episodes so far. It'll be coming out in due course. And I've also created a newsletter, which is the Safe Leader Insights. So I'll be starting to push out content through that in the coming weeks. So please feel free to subscribe through that QR code if you're interested. But other than that, thank you very much for listening to me monologue at you for the last 30 odd minutes. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, no problem. Have you got about 5 minutes before you need to go? Yeah. So thanks for that. Really, really interesting and thought-provoking. I think our sector is a real interesting one in that you've got agriculture and engineering mixed together. And I think often the people who are working in the engineering areas will fall into the general engineering groups, which will get picked up by some of the studies you've done. Whereas agriculture is completely separate. And of course wouldn't. And agriculture has got some real challenges around mental health and suicide and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's also got some big challenges around health and safety and fate. It's the worst industry to work in from a fatality perspective. The industry stats are appalling. And of course that won't include suicide. And I would imagine, and it's a data-free opinion, that suicide rates in agriculture are probably quite high. And then when you go on to self-harm, we won't have a clue. We would not have a clue, I don't think, about self-harm in ag. You probably only hear about the people who sadly take their own life, So really interesting study. Yeah. Absolutely.
We are going to do, I should say, we are going to do a version 3 of the survey. It's going to be released next week, the Masculinity and Engineering Survey. So if you wanted to share that with your members, I'd love to get a larger sample size.
Yeah, absolutely. We
do ask
help with that
background, so we can do that.
Yeah. We've got a couple of questions. Mine was sort of more of a comment, but I've just sort of covered that. Mark Andrews, do you want to unmute yourself and ask? Just while Mark does that, I missed right off the end of your name in introduction. Has that changed since July?
No.
Oh, right, that's my mistake then, because I did write some words when you were going to present back in July.
That's all right.
So I apologise for missing right off the end.
That's fine. I've been
hopefully
before.
Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. Really interesting, Mark. Touches a lot of things as a manager and what I've done in the past. I've recruited from very diverse backgrounds, had a lot of flack from my managers and peers, actually, recruiting sometimes non-qualified people, putting them in an engineering office, simply because they had the personal traits that I was after. They could do the work, but of course that puts them in an awkward situation. You've got to stand by and support them. I was really horrified to hear that more women are leaving engineering. That I thought that we're all very conservative, small c, almost. I joke that I was brought up in an Edwardian family. Yeah, and I brought my children up to be millennials, and I'm really surprised Have you any idea, concept, why the statistics are pointing that way?
Definitely. So engineering, it's from the 2024 Engineering UK data set. It was published in August, I think. So it's the most accurate representation of the sector. So there is a caveat that they do believe that it's an adjustment post-COVID with people making different decisions based on, this is the course they want their life to go type thing. But then why then are they deciding that? why haven't they come back or been retained? So that's one self-reflection. I also think, and this is anecdotal from what I've heard through women that I know, this isn't lots of people said this type thing. The women who have fought to get even the small increments in the improvements that we've seen, they are now in those years in their life where they're more likely to be going through the menopause and stuff like that, and how that's experiencing them. So they've been trying to work really hard to create a culture that's better representation for the women coming behind them. And now in their 40s, 50s, they're starting to go through another barrier in life. And it's only really in the 10 years that I've been doing this EDI work now, neurodiversity was not in the vocabulary 10 years ago, and menopause was not spoken about 10 years ago. Only really started getting spoken about in the last 2 years. Davina McCall did a really good campaign about it, like a TV program about it, to try and destigmatize menopause. And if women don't get on the right HRT and the right hormone therapies and that, some women, it takes them to really dark places. The incident rate of depression is really, really high for some women. And so I would just, I guess, ask you, I don't have this experience because I'm gay and I have a husband, so I haven't grown up in a household. My mum's quite young when she had me as well, so I haven't really grown up with a personal frame of reference on menopause in my family. But I meet a lot of men where it's, laughed off, or it's belittled or diminished slightly, maybe, like what women might be going through, or what wives or friends might be going through. It's laughed off. So, but maybe they're masking, maybe they're covering, maybe they're hiding, maybe it's they're not able to be open about what they're going through. And so as men, as males, we've got a lot of work to do to challenge everything that's led to a culture of where women just have to, for the way we are things, gender inequity, pay gap inequity, just everything, the rate at which people experience sexual harassment in the workplace, and honestly, there's just so much that we do not understand as men because we are not women. It's not in our day-to-day lived experience. Do you have to, the number of friends that I've met who walk home at night and have their keys in their hand like this in case they get attacked, or they carry pepper spray on them in case they get attacked. I lived in London near where Sarah Everard got picked up by that police officer and then murdered when I lived in London, and that led to an outcry of women being open about how they experience the world. Actually, over here in the US, I'm not really seeing much coming out of the UK now, but one thing that did go viral on social media last week or 2 weeks ago was the Graham Norton show, where I can't remember the actress's name, but all the guys were laughing about, oh, when you're walking home at night, first thing you're going to do if you're being attacked is call your friends. And Saoirse, I think her name was, just said, that's every woman in this room, right? Deathly silence. The guys were like, yeah, okay, fine. So you think but you don't, so you need to give space, and then when people share, we need to figure out, well, how do we take action on this? What do we do? I don't have all the answers, but what I know is we need to do something. We need to Even I've been guilty of it with women in our organization. You know, I've been when people have had to stay overnight at hotels, I'm going straight to, well, what's the cheapest accommodation? Is there a B&B that's there? You know, rather than thinking, well, if my colleague's traveling to Exeter, she's going to arrive late at night, would I prefer that she's in a Premier Inn that has a check-in desk, open 24 hours, security cameras, rather than a random Airbnb where I've tried to save 30 quid and it's got dodgy check-in instructions and she's arriving late at night. You see, so again, that's lone working, that's safety. Did I do a risk analysis, a travel risk analysis for her going to then do that work and think about how she's getting there, the experience of checking in? No. Now we do. Now we talk about it, we think about it, we have a process where she'll check in and we try and avoid that situation altogether by, you know, making sure she arrives at a decent time and what have you. But yeah, you just have to think about your practice and think about what you do in safety and how can we bring this into the conversation so it's less additional. It should be part of our engineering and it sits within risk assessment and building safe cultures.
Good,
Okay.
thanks.
Really interesting, really interesting. Have you got time for one more question?
Yeah, do one more, yeah.
I think there's a few comments, but one question in there is Mr. Plum, if you want to unmute.
Hello there.
Hi.
Hi, Charlie. Hi, Mark. Yeah, really quite insightful and thought-provoking. My background's in the health and safety field, so a lot of that in terms of diversity and neurodiversity, etc., is very relevant in relation to well-being, which is really at the top of the health and safety agenda for so many organisations now. I also have a ADHD identified granddaughter who occasionally goes into meltdown, and to see that is really quite shocking. And if that was in the workplace, it would be difficult to take in, really. And anyway, that's a personal view, but it's really just a suggestion. I wondered if you'd had any dealings with the National Federation of Young Farmers Clubs, because they're recognising, obviously, in the relation to suicide rates and so on, really looking at personal well-being in agriculture and recognising diversity.
No, I will look them up. I have been in talks with obviously the institution and also the National Farmers Union.
Yes.
I've been approached to, is there some work we can do there using like engineering as a model industry, I guess, that's got similarities to agriculture. So there's engineers within agriculture, that's what your community is. But you know, agriculture is larger than just engineering. Yeah. So those conversations are still ongoing. We haven't come up with any sort of plan, or, you know, we could do this. We could.
I just think it another avenue for your surveys or research type work and so on, as well as contributing to their thinking.
Just one comment. One thing I'm really interested to unpick over here in the US, given the presidential election, you know, some large farming suppliers have started to go backwards and retract their commitment to you know, EDI, like Tractor Supply, John Deere, like through pressure. So it'll just be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Richard.
Yeah, two questions. I've encountered skills diversity, which I've found quite interesting in my career as an engineer. And the other one is religious diversity. People are very careful sometimes to hide their particular religious bent or movement or entrainment. We encountered one yesterday where somebody was totally entrained and inflexible. But anyhow, those are just 2 points that might be worth exploring.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Totally agree. And people often think that EDI is about now making, again, this comes to this binary mindset. You now have to agree with me. Oh, what you are or who you are or how you live your life conflicts with how I live my life and my belief system. Oh, well, then we both can't coexist in this, you know, workplace ecosystem. So actually, it's about creating that tolerance and that respect. And sometimes there might be ground that's ceded on a couple of grounds, but it should never be at the expense of an individual's ability to flourish, be who they are, and express. And so it's a very interesting point that we're all human. It drives emotive responses usually rather than rational responses. So yes.
You find in
think,
some
you know-
religious groups, and I've noticed it once or twice, oh, you're not part of this particular church, or you're not that particular church, or particularly in this day and age when we've got the conflict in the Middle East there, where you know that's causing people to be in one camp or the other camp, which is not helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think
Anyway.
as an organisation like us as well, it's quite a tricky area to navigate because we haven't got the critical mass like, you know, the Institute of Chemical Engineers or the mechanical engineers. And I think, you know, certainly the view we've taken is just approach it, keep it simple, and be welcoming to everybody, and really open. You know, it is quite tricky for us.
Wonderful.
Okay, any more questions? Oh, yeah, we have actually. Georgia, probably make this the last question if possible. Do you want to unmute yourself, Georgia?
Hello, yes, it was not a question, it was just to make a comment in
Oh, is it
terms
comment?
of,
Just-
yes, just flexible working conditions will allow more women to study
Yeah.
and remain in engineering. Sorry, I've muted because I'm just at the university just now. So,
Not a problem. It popped up on my screen.
yeah,
But,
Absolutely.
it was just a comment on that.
Really good
Yeah.
point.
Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Excellent.
okay.
Appreciate-
Well, if there's no more questions, then I'll draw things to a close. So thank you so much, Mark, for doing that. That's really giving people some food for thought, and I'm sure plenty of people will watch their presentation afterwards. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I hope you will join us for our next lecture on the 10th of December, where you're going to be joined by yours truly. I'm going to be talking about something the Northern Ireland branch at IAgrE, and that's talk about competition ploughing, which I'm sure is quite alien to a lot of you. I was going to say it can be a light-hearted Christmas lecture, but I'm afraid we take it quite seriously, so it won't be. So all that's left to say is thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.